In a few minutes, I'm going to turn the program over to Harry, back to Harry, who's the coordinator of Beth Israel's Shleimut legal program, and he's going to moderate tonight's session. And I think you're in for a very informative evening. But first, I just want to take a moment to put the Shleimut legal program into context by sharing with you a little bit about Beth Israel Shleimut initiative in general. So it began back in 2005. And since then, Beth Israel Shleimut team has touched the lives of many people in our congregation and our schools by providing confidential support and guidance through our clergy, our Shleimut social worker, and our nurse. Beth Israel is one of the only conservative synagogues in the country to offer Shleimut, which means wholeness in Hebrew. It's an initiative designed to address the holistic needs of congregants and promote health, wellness, and healing within our Beth Israel community. In 2019, our Shleimut team expanded its services to include legal information and guidance for congregants and school families. Today, Shleimut helps Beth Israel congregants manage their physical, mental, legal, and spiritual needs by offering opportunities to consult with a nurse, a social worker, an attorney, and the clergy. So whether you're seeking help managing a physical illness, navigating a life challenge or transition, answering a legal question, or exploring spiritual concerns, our Shleimut team is here for you. Our Shleimut nurse is Sherry Stern. Sherry, you want to wave? And as I mentioned, I'm the social work consultant. Your Shleimut legal team, all of whom are on tonight's program and presenting tonight's program, it's led by Harry Balmo and includes Jeffrey Glazer, Neil Levy, and Joshua Zuckerberg. And then, of course, Rabbi Goldstein and Cantor Rolnick are our Shleimut clergy. So while COVID-19 may limit our in-person consultations, all Shleimut team members are still available to provide free confidential guidance and support over the phone or the computer for any concerns you or a loved one may have. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or if we can be of any assistance. And our contact information is available on Beth Israel's website. And so now it gives me great pleasure to turn the program back over to Harry, and he's going to share a little bit more about our Shleimut legal initiative. He's going to introduce our Shleimut attorneys and moderate tonight's program. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So as I'm sure you've heard on every single Zoom meeting you've been on, I would ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. One of these days, nobody will have to say that anymore. I'm Harry Balmo. I've been associated with the congregation for many, many years and am proud to have been a part to bring the Shleimut legal initiative to Beth Israel in 2018. We're guided by the principle that uplifting people within a faith community strengthens both the individuals affected and our local community. Shleimut Legal provides valuable information and guidance on legal matters and the legal system. Over the past few years, we've been contacted and we've addressed many different types of legal questions. For example, we've been asked, how do I collect a debt that somebody owes me? I've received a subpoena. What do I do next? I caused a car crash. What should I do? I can't pay my rent. What should I do? A close relative just died. Who's going to take care of the estate? How long does it take for a court case to get to trial? Those are just examples of the types of questions that we get, and it will help provide some guidance and some general information about the legal system. I too want to give a special shout out and thank you to the three other attorneys who have been with this initiative since its inception: Jeff Glazer, Neil Levy, and Joshua Zuckerberg, all of whom are going to join the discussion tonight. Throughout the year, we're all reachable through the synagogue office. You can either leave us a message or use our voicemail, and also through synagogue email. Now, let's talk about tonight's program a little bit. As we all get older, the concept of children and parents having the talk takes on a new meaning and significance. No longer does having the talk refer to the birds and bees when it comes to our children. As we all age, as both parents and as children, Having important family conversations becomes vital, albeit sometimes very difficult and awkward. Let's be very clear. These are not easy conversations to have, and it's not always an easy subject to bring up. Tonight, we will address financial, medical, and practical discussions that we believe all adults and their children should have. We've saved some time at the end of tonight's presentation for questions and answers. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentations. During the program, please feel free to use the chat function of the Zoom meeting to post any questions. If you prefer, you can send them privately to me also through the chat function on Zoom. It's our hope that after tonight's program, that you'll have a good understanding of why it is so important to have these discussions, what to discuss, and how to begin these important generational discussions. We hope that you will take the initiative to do something, anything about this, or at the very least to have a plan in place for when you will address these matters. First up tonight in the program is Cantor Rolnick, who will offer some clergy perspective on the importance of these discussions consistent with our Jewish values. Cantor, it's all yours.
Thank you. And hopefully everyone can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Thank you. And thank you, Harry, for framing tonight so nicely. And I wanted to just give a little bit of glimpse of the Jewish perspective on some of these conversations as well. So you'll notice here, children on the right taking swimming lessons, and parents and their adult child having a conversation. And you might wonder what these two things might have to do with each other. They look pretty unrelated on the surface. But we'll take a closer look and see what the connection is between them. So if we look at a little bit of wisdom from our sages from Kiddushin 29a, we'll see that a parent is obligated to do the following things for their child. And in order to save lots of time for the essence of our conversation tonight, we'll just kind of go through them quickly. We won't make it such a full discussion, group discussion. So among the many things, you'll notice that the sixth obligation of a parent to a child is to teach him or her how to swim. And you might wonder how that fits in with all of the other obligations above. It seems quite unrelated. So why do our sages say that it's important that our children know how to swim? Well, swimming in the ancient world was a life skill. We lived near water and we did a lot of commerce and traveled across water. And so a child that didn't know how to swim was not prepared to survive in the real world. So swimming was a metaphor for life skills. And in fact, we don't have to go that far to see how important swimming is even to us today. So here are some photos, you might recognize them, of the Inner Harbor right here in Baltimore. And this is how it looks today, but it didn't always look this way. Many years ago, it looked a little bit more like this. And you'll see that life really revolved around the water. And without that basic skill of being able to swim, you couldn't really say that your child was prepared for all of the realities and practicalities of life. So, what is learning to swim today all about? What are those life skills that we need to have, and those conversations that we need to have in order to navigate the realities and the practical issues that come up in everyday life? And that, I think, is what our conversation tonight is going to be all about. Not only financial, but other practical matters that are really important to discuss and how to open that conversation. So I'm happy to turn things back over to Harry to get us into the essence of our program for tonight.
Thank you, Canner. So first up tonight is Jeffrey Glazer. Jeff is a partner with the law firm of Saul, Ewing, Arnstein, and Lair. Jeff's practice focuses on estate planning, business succession planning, tax planning, asset protection planning, trust and estate administration, and premarital agreements. Jeff is a fellow of the American College of Trust and Estate Council and is a past president of the Baltimore Estate Planning Council. Jeff has lectured, authored, and chaired a number of continuing legal education programs for the Maryland State Bar Association and the Maryland Association of CPAs, and he has spoken to numerous professional organizations, charitable groups, and businesses. Jeff has been recognized as Tier 1 by Chambers and Partners in its High Net Worth Law Survey since 2016. Jeff received an AB degree from Boston College, an MA degree in economics from the University of Maryland, and a law degree as well from the University of Maryland. Jeff, all yours.
Okay, great. I should be off of mute, so hopefully everybody can hear me. Thank you, Harry, for that introduction, and I'm excited to be able to talk to folks tonight. First, I want to just give an overview of sort of the two broad areas that I want to discuss. One of which is, when, how, and why to have the talk, and then that's really just a broad, matter to cover. But more specifically, more financial considerations. Neil Levy is going to talk on medical matters, and Josh Zuckerberg is going to talk about some other practical considerations, and I will discuss some of the financial issues. But before we go into this, I think it's helpful to tie together a couple of things. One of which is that what Sarah just said, the purpose of Shleimut is sort of a holistic approach to well-being. And even though this topic we're talking about tonight is really from a legal perspective, it really is much broader than that. These issues that we're talking about concern things such as your own well-being, your own peace of mind, your kids' peace of mind, and the sort of the non-traditional legal aspects that go along with maintaining harmonious relationships between siblings, between parents, etc. So in my view, it's extremely important that when there is an incapacity or a death, there's not too many surprises, because when there are surprises, it tends to create animosity, resentment, and all sorts of other bad feelings between family members. So in that respect, I think it's really important that the context in which this discussion is had is for the purpose of relieving people's anxiety and a burden about, I want to ask, but I don't feel comfortable asking. I want to discuss, but I don't feel comfortable discussing. If you can get past that and get over that, I think that your family and the people that are involved with these decisions will be in a much better place. I also want to make sure that people understand that everybody's circumstances are different. There is no rule, there is no right way. There's plenty of wrong ways to go about this, but there's no real right way. This is an art, it is not a science. And I'll give you a couple of anecdotal experiences that I've had that kind of illustrate, I think, why it's important to have this discussion. So a number of years ago, I had a client who wealthy, owned a family business, had one child who succeeded in the family business, another child was not in the family business. But this individual owned a home. It was a very old home, and there was a lot of work that needed to be done on this home while he was living. And he made a conscious decision to not do any work on this home. After and while he was alive, he basically said, they'll deal with it when I'm gone. And he passed away. And after he died, we get to the point where we need to sell the house. Well, selling the house became a real burden because there was an underground storage tank that had leaked and needed to be replaced years before. And this gentleman decided he didn't want to do that. It was going to be somebody else's problem. And there were a number of other sort of things that became apparent while we went through the administration of the estate. And at the end of the day, it caused an enormous amount of resentment and discord between the children, because there was this feeling that, why would you leave me with this mess when you could have handled this yourself, when you knew what the problems were? We didn't know. We didn't live in the house. We didn't know what the problems were. And we're finding all this out after you're gone. That's kind of the approach or the perspective. So that's like an experience that I had that I felt pretty strongly was weighed heavily toward talk to your children and explain, these are some things that you're going to have to deal with. Don't spring it on them as a surprise. I'll give you another anecdotal kind of experience, one that is fairly common, and that is mom or dad may have talked about something during life, may have mentioned a life insurance policy or a safe deposit box or something, but they never really go into details. And then the person passes away, and then usually it's the children who now have this idea in their head, well, there was a life insurance policy somewhere, or there's a safe deposit box somewhere, or there's something somewhere, and nobody really told us about this. How am I supposed to find it? And it creates an awful lot of problems and cost and time, because people are looking for things that they may not necessarily have specific information about. And you have these cross currents of people trying to find things while at the same time dealing with the emotional loss of a parent.
This is very good.
And so that's another reason why the failure to kind of have an open discussion can lead to all sorts of people running around, digging holes to look for things, spending time, effort, energy, and money, tracking things down. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe the life insurance policy lapsed, maybe it didn't lapse. There are plenty of things that you probably know, or maybe your parents know, that you're not opening up about, or they're not opening up about. And those are the things that are really important to communicate. So generally speaking, that's one of the reasons why you want to have this discussion. And like I said, it's an art, it's not a science. And everybody's circumstances are different. Some people feel very comfortable laying it all out to say, here's what I've got. These are the bank accounts. These are my investment accounts. Here's my retirement account. Here's my CPA or my tax preparer. Here's my investment advisor. Here's a list of everything. Some people don't have that level of comfort. And so maybe what's more appropriate is you simply say, if something happens to me, there's a list of things that I have, and here's where you can go find it. If you don't have that level of communication, it will be really difficult for your family members, usually children, to find these things. It creates all sorts of anxiety and problems. In addition, I think it's really important, and again, this depends on your level of comfort. It's really important to maybe explain if there is going to be an unequal treatment of children. Harder, it's not always the case that this has to be disclosed or explained, but if you fail to have, if there's not an understanding as to why some people were treated differently than others, especially after you're gone, it can create all sorts of resentment and discord between, especially siblings. And so if there is a rationale, if there is a reason, it's oftentimes helpful to, you don't have to go into all sorts of details, but at least a general explanation. I gave you all this money to start your business, and I never gave this money to your sister. And I want to maybe try to have some adjustment for that. I paid for education expenses for your 5 grandchildren, and your brother has only 1 child, and he and that grandchild got a scholarship. So I want to try to equalize how much is being given to each side of the family. There's all sorts of reasons why people have adjustments in the way they distribute assets after death, but I think it's helpful and important to have some level of understanding. Now, I don't have a lot of time left. There's only a few more minutes, but I do want to talk about a couple of things. While you are living, powers of attorney are typically the instruments that are used where you give somebody else the ability to manage your financial affairs. There's all sorts of decisions that go into who do you choose, when do you give them the information, do you choose more than one person? Should more than one person be doing this? What are the characteristics to look for? What happens if I don't have a power of attorney and I become incapacitated? So I'll kind of address a couple of these things very briefly. I don't want to get into too much detail. But the first question is, when you explain or talk to usually children, to go over, I've appointed you, I want you to help manage my financial affairs. How much information do you disclose? Do you give him the keys to the kingdom as sort of a, phrase that people think about? Or do you just simply give the person a map to say, here's where my accounts are. If something happens to me, you'll have to deal, this is where you go to pay my bills. This is where you go to make claims for insurance purposes. I think it's really important to disclose as much as you're comfortable disclosing. The longer you wait, the greater the risk is that you may suffer an incapacity, or maybe your parent may suffer an incapacity, and they may not be able to explain and tell the child or the person that they want to name as the agent under the power of attorney. They may not be capable of doing that at some point in the future. And in today's world, where so many of our affairs are managed on a computer, I think it's even more important to have some level of access that you don't have to give your children that access right now, but explain to them how they can get access to it if something were to happen to you, or tell them where to look for your passwords and things like that if you were to become incapacitated. Usually when you name someone under a power of attorney, you want to look for somebody who is responsible, pays their bills on time. They don't have to be a Wall Street whiz, but it's helpful that the person that you name has the time. It can be a very time-consuming process, has the time, is responsible, knows how to balance a checkbook, doesn't, if they have the choice between paying a bill in full or maybe paying the minimum balance, pay the bill in full. Don't carry that 24% interest charge on your credit cards every month. Those are the types of things to look for. Some people say, should I name both of my kids or only one of my children? And I have a worry that if I only name one child as my agent under power of attorney, it looks like I'm favoring them. Well, there's no right way to do it. If you name multiple children, there's a risk they may not agree. If you name only one, because you're worried that one child is the alpha and always gets their way, and the other child is sort of subservient, are you setting up your children again to have that master-servant relationship where one always gets their way and the other doesn't? So it's the type of thing that requires thought and reflection when you make these decisions about who do you name. These are just some very broad issues to consider. If you don't have a power of attorney and you suffer an incapacity, the remedy or the what has to be done is a guardianship, and a guardianship is oftentimes, but not always, oftentimes is not an optimal solution. It is a court supervised procedure. It can be expensive, and it is, for most people, it is not what they would want. So those are just a few thoughts and considerations when you go through this process about having to talk, who do you name, and how do you arrange your affairs. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Harry.
Thank you, Jeff. Very, very informative. Next up tonight is Neil Levy, who's going to talk to us about medical issues, advanced directives, and the like. Neil is a partner with the law firm of Levy, Mann, Kaplan, Herman, and Polishuk in Owings Mills. He has over 30 years of legal experience representing individuals and business clients in corporate and real estate transactions, business organization, commercial finance, employment, wills, and estate administration. Neil is a 1984 graduate of the University of Maryland School of Law, Maryland Law Review, and has a BS degree in political science from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. His family has been a member of Beth Israel with us since 1996. Neil, all yours.
Thank you. Planning for medical decisions is often, it's one of the most uncomfortable thing to discuss within your family. It's a difficult topic, and I'm going to try to go through a lot of the key elements tonight. But no one likes to think about being very sick or dying, and on top of that, no one really likes to think about going to see a lawyer or doing legal documents. So, but medical crisis could come up at any time. And the things we think about today, or the things that came to my mind first, is number one is COVID, which has ended a lot of people in the hospital very, quickly, unexpectedly. They were isolated from their families and might not be able to communicate, all of a sudden. Another thing that's, pretty common in our community is dementia, Alzheimer's disease, where it's a slowly progressing medical condition, but also very quickly you can go from, someone who is fully cognizant to not being able to make decisions. And, I had an experience in my own family. My mom was one of the people who kind of put off doing estate planning, and we never really had the talk. And she was fine. She was in her mid 80s, and all of a sudden one day we went over her house, and her memory, her cognitive abilities just weren't there like they used to be. And then I say, well, now how do we plan these things? I can't really, things change very quickly. I couldn't talk to her like I used to. So, that's, all of us procrastinate about all kinds of things. And this is one topic that everybody procrastinates as much as they can. but it's really important to come to grips with it one way or another. When we talk about how to get the conversation started, I guess I just always believe in being real straightforward and honest and just coming out with it to get your parent, or if you're older, to get your children involved. Just wrote a few lines down. One, I'm okay now, but I'm worried about the future. What would happen to me if, whatever. To your parent, you might say, you've always taken good care of me. Now I want to be the one to take good care of you. I need to understand what you want. And I guess that's the line of thinking. And when you start to plan an advance directive for your medical care, the main thing is to make sure either you're spelling out decisions you want, or you pick somebody that you really trust to make them for you. And in order to go through the issues, I pulled out the Maryland Advance Directive form, which is it's available on the Attorney General's page online. It's very common. A lot of attorneys use this rather than draft their own form because it's, it absolutely complies with the law. It's going to be enforceable, and it's pretty easy to read through. And I often tell people, just print it out, read through it on your own. I'll help you if you need, but you can do this on your own if you want to. So really for no cost. So just to go through sort of the basics, it's not really that complex. The first thing is choosing a healthcare agent, primary agent, somebody you trust, very often a close family member, someone who's going to be there if you're sick. If you're in the hospital, your friend in Alaska or California is not going to be by the bedside to listen to the doctor and know what you need. Ideally, you want somebody who understands your values, what's important to you, and possibly somebody you've really discussed medical things with, what you want, what you don't want. Your agent could be the person who decides things such as, how the doctor's going to treat you, what hospital you go to. They're going to be possibly, they will be allowed to visit you in the hospital if you need to convey your wishes to them. And they're also, I believe, able to get medical information under HIPAA, whereas the doctor wouldn't always be able to disclose that to just anyone. You can also put in people that your agent should consult with, such as your doctor, your family members. And it's also a good idea to pick a backup person. You never know, the person you pick might be ill or incapacitated or whatever. So it's good to have a number two person. So that's the first part of an advance directive, picking an agent and answering these basic questions. A lot of people just do that first part, and that's all they do, and that's all you have to do. So, we recommend everyone do that first part. The second part it's a lot harder. This is what we used to call the living will, and it's the really hard questions that are difficult to deal with. There, what treatment would you like if you're in a coma, or you're about to die, or you're in a really bad state? But these are things some people like to make these decisions. Quite a few people I talk to just say, I've picked my agent, I trust them, I don't want to think about the bad stuff. So that's one way to go. But the other way is to go through all this and make your individual decisions. Let's see. The last thing I'll just mention in the advance directive is you can make it effective immediately. Or you could say it's only effective once your doctors have determined that you cannot make decisions for yourself. Now, there's a part of the law that says if so long as you can make a decision for yourself, you're always allowed to do that, or not allowed, you will be the one who makes the call. So if your doctor can talk to you and explain what the problem is or what procedure needs to be done, and if you're alert and you can give an answer, then you know your wishes are going to be respected. So a lot of people worry they sign an advance directive and they're turning their health care over to their son or their daughter, and they're not going to be able to be involved on important decisions. So that's not the case. Okay. Next, where can you get an advance directive? So I've told you about the Maryland website of the Attorney General. That's an easy place. There's a website called 5 Wishes, which I really had not heard of until Jeff mentioned it the other day. And so I went to their website to look at that. It's a very simple, easy to read, easy to understand advance directive. I think it costs a few dollars and you can download it for yourself. Otherwise, you can go to an attorney who can prepare one that will really specify anything you want. And also when you go to the hospital, or if you're in a nursing home or even a rehab facility, they usually will give you an advance directive form. Often a social worker at one of these facilities will pretty much ask everyone if they want to sign one at that point, and they'll help you through it. So, I guess my main thought at the end of this is, you can't plan for everything. You don't know what's going to happen. There's always twists and turns in your life, but if you can choose somebody to rely on and make the decisions that you really feel comfortable making, you'll give yourself some peace of mind. You'll give your family, your children some peace of mind, and you'll also, put them in a position where they're not going to be stressed out that they made the wrong decision or they did something that you don't want, because when the situation arises, it can be very difficult. And if 2 siblings are arguing about how they want mom treated, it makes it worse for all 3 of you. And as an older person, that peace of mind you're giving to your family, that's a gift to them. So just last thing I just wanted to mention quickly, what happens if you don't do an advance directive and you get sick, you're in the hospital all of a sudden, there are some alternatives. Someone asked the other night about the MOST form, which is a form that the doctor signs, which hopefully he does it with the input from the patient and the family of the person. And that usually has the heavy decisions as far as do not resuscitate or life support kind of things. And they'll do that in the hospital. And I think the big benefit there is that one doctor talks to the family, talks to the patient, fills out the form, and then it's available to anyone else who happens to be taking care of you there. So, when the night shift comes on, there's a different doctor. They'll know what the first one without having to go through it again and again. So that's all I got.
Neil, I just want to emphasize something that, or at least make sure that people understand. You just talked about when you can prepare an advance directive. And you mentioned, when you go in the hospital or you go into a rehab facility, that's the second question, right? The first is, what's your insurance policy? But
Right.
Generally, I think that it's a bad idea for people to wait until then to start considering those types of decisions, because oftentimes when you're in a situation where you're faced with a medical procedure or you're suffering from an injury or an illness, you're probably focused on other things, and it's not the most ideal time to be considering your choices for the people that you want to make decisions, as well as what your decisions would be, your instructions that you would give to your family members.
Right. So, with that in mind, if you've already done an advance directive and you're going to the hospital for, for any reason, you should have a copy of it with you so you can give to those people instead. Because, if you have one that's home and it's in the safe or in the bookshelf behind 100 things, nobody's going to find it when they need it.
All right, thank you, Neil. That's some really good advice. And in fact, I've heard from other attorneys who make the recommendation that people establish a cloud account of some sort, so that if they ever need to access any of their advanced directives, powers of attorney, that appropriately protected, that they can access it. So just another thought there. So, all
and you
right.
have to remember your password.
Yes. Yes, thank goodness for password reminder programs and apps. All right, so next, let me bring into the discussion Joshua Zuckerberg. Josh is a University of Maryland undergrad. He has a JD and MBA from the University of Baltimore. He's been practicing since 2003, and he's been with the firm of Chase and Hammerschlag since 2003. His practice areas include probate administration, estate-related matters, and real property, with a special emphasis on tax sale foreclosures. Josh is going to talk with us tonight about some of the practical considerations as we go through this process. Josh?
Thank you, Harry. Good evening, everyone. So this just actually happened to me today, which is really funny. I had a client come in. They basically wanted my advice on how to deal with something where their parent was incapacitated. They were in another state. They needed to pay some bills. They didn't have a power of attorney. They didn't have anything else. My first question was, do you know their bank password? Because you can just go in and pay the bills from there, right? Practically speaking, which led me to this discussion. Hey, if we had all our stuff in one place, it'd be very convenient, right? So we've talked about wills. We kind of glossed over that one a little bit, but wills, power of attorney, advanced directives. You're picking somebody to be your agent. You're picking somebody to take care of your matters. They should not have to search your house like we've talked about. Search all your papers, go through your file cabinets, find your safety deposit key box to get into that, to be able to handle your affairs. So the best thing to do would be to have a little organization, a little pre-planning, and get all that stuff together and have it in one spot, and then tell your agent, your spouse, because they might not even be your agent, but hey, they still got to pay bills when you're away or somewhere else. Where that is, so that they can at least get into the accounts, pay the bills, do those sort of things. So in prepping for this, a couple of things that we looked at, there was a couple years back, it might have been 3 years back. Sarah, you would be able to tell me that better than me. JCS did a program where they had a binder and they put lots of stuff in the binders, and I found that very informative when I was going through preparing for this. Pretty much covered most of the things that I would think about anyway. I can't remember in it whether or not it had anything about passwords, which in today's day and age, I think is username and passwords is one of the bigger things. I mean, you can always ask for them to send it back, but then you got to know your parents' middle name and what street they grew up on and who their first pet was. But if you can put all that stuff together, and that JCS thing recommended a binder, I find that brilliant because you can remove things and put things in without tearing the whole thing up. Then you made everybody's life that much easier. Things that go into that binder would be, for instance, your will, your power of attorney, and your advance directive, like we talked about. your passwords. You can put in, whether or not you made any pre-funeral arrangements, what you paid, who do you want buried, what kind of ceremony you want, who your doctors are, who's your attorney, who's your accountant, where they can find information that they're going to need, or who to talk to, with phone numbers, insurance information. If you have life insurance policy, who the beneficiaries are, so they can, be contacted to send in, the information they need in order to be paid out once you're passed. Your other list of assets, what is the personal representative in your estate going to collect? So your house, your car, your bank accounts, anything that you haven't kind of pre-gifted already. And then, what's your debts? Where are your liabilities? What needs to be paid? All this, the more things that you can get together beforehand, the easier the process goes. And assuming it's your son or daughter that is handling this for you, or your spouse, unfortunately, then they can start the grieving process a lot sooner without having to deal with all the headache that comes with dealing with somebody's assets and their life after they've gone, so that it can all be distributed. It's really it. The other things you can think about is, if you have specific requests for your funeral, like who you want to be your pallbearers, your rabbi or your cantor, who would you like to handle your service? Those kind of things would also be in there. And the last thing that, I would say in there is, if you have the time and you feel like it, a letter to your loved ones in there. I know I would have enjoyed, thankfully both my parents are alive, but when my grandfather passed, I didn't get to say goodbye. If there had been some letter that said something to me, I would have been extremely, extremely happy about that. I probably would have cried, but at the same time, later on, I would have liked it. I mean, practically speaking, that's, we talk in high school and about notes and organization, and it really carries through everything in your life. And if you can be organized now, it makes everything easier in the long run.